So, this is a topic that has been requested time and time again as I've been doing our intro webinars and then the advanced introductory session that kind of gives you the foundations for a priority matrix. And then during the advanced session, I actually kind of touch on some of the more advanced features, such as how priority matrix supports you during meetings. So we can actually expect this webinar to be a little bit shorter. I would expect it to be probably 20 to 25 minutes, just because we're really only going to be looking at one topic here, not exploring so many different scenarios in priority matrix. But today's session is going to be how you can use priority matrix for Office 365 to have effective meetings. So I think that this slide can probably resonate with a lot of us on the meeting today, which is the idea of asking, so what actually makes a meeting effective? From my experience talking with so many people in leadership positions and, essentially employees that sit through meetings all day long sometimes, we at least want those meetings to be effective and we want to walk away from them feeling like it was worth our time. So what can an effective meeting look like? It will look like a clear and concise agenda laid out prior to the meeting. What this allows us to understand is, hey, as an employee, do I actually need to attend this meeting, or is it just going to be, relevant to some of my employees, but not so much important for me to join? I've spoken with a lot of managers who have kind of come to the conclusion that if we have a clear and concise agenda in place, then our employees should be able to decide if it's worthwhile for their time or if there's other priorities that they should be working on. An effective meeting also allows you to share progress updates on those top priorities, making sure everything you need to talk about has the place to be discussed. An effective meeting allows you to actively prioritize new tasks. So when the meeting ends, your priorities are aligned and everybody does indeed understand where they need to get started next. So what is the priority matrix approach and how have we helped so many organizations have more effective meetings? Number one, priority matrix helps you prepare for the meeting. We're going to take a close look at this during the live demo portion. I'm going to show you how it helps you prepare for a one-on-one meeting and then also more of a team meeting agenda. Priority matrix does provide a collaborative space prior to the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting. So as your priorities are shifting and you're sharing status updates, everybody can kind of pitch in and jot down the information that's needed. Priority matrix makes sure that priorities are aligned and it also sets teams up for success post-meeting by doing a couple different things. And I'm going to touch on kind of those final meeting points in a couple slides into the future. But overall, I would say this is how the priority matrix approach has helped so many organizations have more effective meetings. So one of the ways that priority matrix supports users during meetings is actually during those one-on-one meetings. So this is a little screenshot of a specific view that we have within the system. I just wanted to put this here to kind of, grab your attention and help you prepare for what we're going to be looking at during the live session. The other way that priority matrix helps people prepare is by providing a meeting agenda for those group meetings hosted via Microsoft Teams. Again, we're going to dive into both those views a lot more during the live demo, but just wanted to kind of give you a lay of the land so you can expect what to see on your screen. So here at Affluence, we've really done our best to make sure that all of your critical details are in one place. So when it comes to working with that meeting agenda or working within priority matrix as you prepare for a meeting, we really want to help you switch context less often by allowing you to see your emails, your priorities, and your meetings all through the priority matrix system. So really you can focus on what matters most when you're preparing for your meeting and when the meeting is over. So again, I just want to remind everybody that your questions are very much appreciated and 100% encouraged at any time. I don't see any questions that have come up yet. So what we'll do now is we'll kind of switch to the live demo portion of this webinar, where I'm actually going to walk you through those two views that we looked at. All right. So, for those of you that are attending the webinar today and you're feeling like, I don't really know much about Priority Matrix, this might be your first time seeing it, I would definitely encourage you to join my intro sessions later this week. On Thursday and Friday, I'm hosting number one, a live introduction to Priority Matrix. And then the following day, it's going to be an advanced intro where we look at some of the more advanced features. That's really going to help you kind of get the lay of the land, understand the fundamentals, and then you can kind of piece together some of the more advanced features, such as the meeting management. But just to kind of get us all off on the same foot, what I have on my screen here, this is my priority matrix. And as you can see, it's running directly through my team's platform. So I do have it pinned open. I always suggest doing that. And then right here in the middle of my screen, this is going to be where you spend a lot of your time collaborating with your teammates and aligning your priorities. These projects that I have on my screen here are essentially designed to give you and your teammates a central space where you're able to track priorities that fall under this project category. These projects can be shared with anybody on your team who needs to be included in this collaborative space, where you can then go through and you can assign priorities. You can invite followers, which is basically signing them up to get notifications for the task. And it gives you a place to share all of these juicy details that come into play when you have a task that needs to be completed at a specific date, such as communicating down here, setting deadlines, which you can do super easily, and sharing progress updates as you work through this task. So I just did a super quick run through of kind of the functionalities within a project, but there's a whole lot more to this. So again, if you're looking at it and you're like, well, I'd really love to understand just kind of the basics of setting up projects and whatnot, joining the introductory webinar is going to be a great place for you. So then the question typically is, oops, I see a question, Julian, can you add resources outside of our organization? I'm not sure I understand that question completely. When it comes to adding resources to an item, you can basically link in any type of resource that you need, whether it's an email, like a URL, a PDF, a Word document, any type of, human resources. So are you kind of asking if you're able to collaborate with people outside of the organization? The answer is absolutely yes. Priority Matrix does not pose any barriers in terms of collaborating with people who have a different email domain, if you will, which is something that's really special about Priority Matrix, because there's absolutely a lot of really powerful project management solutions. But what we've come to understand is some of them, unfortunately, do place barriers, which restrict you to only working within your team or your organization. Priority Matrix doesn't do that. In fact, when I show you the meeting management for group meetings, I'll mention how that ties into working with stakeholders as well. So great question. Thank you so much for asking that. So at this point, we've kind of seen, the general concept of using Priority Matrix, which is creating projects and setting up tasks. Then you can delegate them and just kind of work together as needed. So the next question that typically comes up in terms of meeting management is, okay, that's great, but how do these priorities tie into my one-on-one meetings with a teammate, direct report, executive, whoever it might be? What I'm going to show you next is how you can use those priorities to set up for your one-on-one meetings. When I jump to the one-on-one tab, which is at the top of my screen, the system actually remembered the last person that I chose to show this one-on-one with, but you will have a list of everybody on your team that's using Priority Matrix with you. What happens within this one-on-one view is it looks across all of your projects. So let's say as a team, let's use a crazy example. Let's say you have 100 projects. You can definitely bet that it's going to be challenging to go through all 100 projects and pick out the top priorities between yourself and one other person if you had to do that manually. But the great news is that when you use the Priority Matrix one-on-one view, that manual preparation for the meetings is actually no longer a concern for you. The artificial intelligence running the system basically behind the scenes says, okay, Erica, here's everything that you have in common with the X teammate that you select. What happens here is we're seeing any priority where myself and this demo user, in this case, are both involved in, whether I'm the owner and they're simply a follower, or vice versa, they own it and I've been linked as a follower. So this kind of ties into the importance of the concept of when you're using priority matrix with your manager, for example, if you add a new priority into a project and you think, hey, this is really important for a manager to be aware of, simply link them in as a follower. And then when you jump into your next one-on-one, you're going to have all of those important priorities listed out for you right here. You may have noticed, but at the very start of this meeting, or rather at the very start of when I jumped to the one-on-one, I clicked on this do option because for me, I like to see my priorities based off of my upcoming deadlines. That's just kind of how I like to see it, but there's a couple different ways you can filter your priorities simply just by clicking on the headers here. What's great about this is we can get insight into progress updates. If you click on it, there's more context on the right. So I could say, hey, this due date is tomorrow. Haven't seen any updates from you. And then we could say still on track. Go back here, try to fix a couple of my typos. All right, so that's kind of the idea. Again, for more context, or maybe you want to set a reminder, we could say remind everybody in 20 minutes. You can do a lot of things directly from the one-on-one in terms of updating your priorities and sharing, those types of status updates. So the one-on-one view doesn't only show you your shared priorities. Granted, if it were to stop there, it would still be super duper helpful. Don't get me wrong. But one of the things that here at Appluence we really pride ourselves on is helping a user switch context less often. So what do I mean by that? What we mean is we give you access to any shared emails that you have with a specific person, any upcoming calendar events, and any shared files via OneDrive that you and this other user both have access to. So what's so special about this? I'm sure that we've all been in a meeting where our manager or, teammate says, hey, did you see that email that I forwarded to you last night at 10 p.m.? And you're like, well, actually, no, I didn't see that email. But instead of having to say that, the Office 365 contextual information down here at the bottom is going to have your back. It's going to show you an email that they forwarded you or sent you. So the idea is you can click on it and it's going to give you that context that you need right here on the right-hand side where you can actually see the whole body of that email. From here, at any point, if you feel the need to actually prioritize this email or this meeting, you can send it to Priority Matrix super easily without even having to, change screens here. So happy to pause there, answer any questions about the one-on-one view. In fact, there's one more thing that I wanted to show you, which is the concept of adding a shared task. So at the start of the presentation, I touched on the importance of having a collaborative space actually during the meeting, which, a lot of us don't have unless we use the system already. But what you can do is you can actually add a shared task. So we'll just say test item. We'll say this is going to be due in 4 hours. So then we can add all the item notes. And I see this coming into play a lot when people are talking about, new ideas, new initiatives they need to put into place. Instead of having to write it down on a piece of paper or, an email, a Word document, just go ahead and prioritize it right off the bat. So later on, you basically know exactly where you need to get started. And as you can see, this was now added to our shared priority list because I put due in 4 hours. The system was actually reading that and it picked up the due date for me, which is really cool. So that's going to be the first opportunity to use Priority Matrix for meeting support. A different way you can access the one-on-one view, besides using it how we're looking at it here, which is basically the full Priority Matrix app, and then I went to one-on-one. But in terms of using Priority Matrix through your Microsoft Teams chats, I know a lot of us have chats up and running all the time. You can actually add the one-on-one view as an add-on to all of your chats with your teammates. And then when you're ready to jump into that one-on-one, you can basically just go to your chat with that person, and it's going to show you all of that information that you need. So if I drag this up, then we'll be able to see, again, the office information at the bottom. So kind of shifting gears here, let's talk about how Priority Matrix actually supports you in more of the kind of team meeting aspect as well. So for those of you that set up your team meetings through Microsoft Teams, you're absolutely in luck, because that's the foundation for using what we call Agenda by Priority Matrix. So one thing I always like to mention, because it is a really common question, which is, so I'm setting up this meeting, but I don't see the little plus icon that I have up here. A lot of people say that they can't see that. Reason being is because you actually need to add one person to that meeting, save it, and then venture back into it, and then you'll see the plus icon once you hit edit meeting. So I just kind of like to get that out of the way, because it is a common barrier that people face. Once you've done that, you can click on the plus icon and add Agenda by Priority Matrix. So what happens at this point? In my example, you'll see that there's Pablo and myself, just two people, but even if there were 10, 20, 30, 40 people even, I know that sounds crazy, but the system is going to support anybody that's using Priority Matrix that you added to this meeting through Teams, essentially. So what happens at this point? The artificial intelligence behind the scenes looks through each person who is part of this meeting and says, here are your top priority items based off of what you have recently modified. So I've actually noticed that the artificial intelligence does a fantastic job. And for the most part, it's pretty much on par with things that I need to talk about during my meetings. If for whatever reason you're like, okay, well, I don't want to talk about this today, you can just remove it from your agenda. But I do want to talk about this priority, and I also want to talk about this one. So as you can see on the right-hand side of my screen, I actually have access to all of my priority matrix items over here, where I can just kind of grab from them to decide what I plan to talk about during the meeting. What this does is, again, it gives everybody kind of a heads up. Hey, here's what I'm going to be talking about. Here's our meeting agenda. And it takes away that manual planning aspect for the most part. Again, you may need to go through and add a couple more priorities if you want to. But like I said, I've received really positive feedback that for the most part, the agenda automatically is pretty much good to go. So again, everybody on the meeting is able to do this for their own little meeting agenda. You can also create items. So if there's a new initiative you want to talk about during this meeting that hasn't been prioritized yet, you can create it. We'll say new item. You can add your due date super easily. And then you could actually prioritize it into the correct project and quadrant as well. So this is all kind of the pre-meeting and preparation aspect. If I were to hit join, which I'm not going to do because I don't want to throw off the webinar we have set up here together. But if I were to hit join, it would look exactly like our webinar does today through the Teams interface. But what you'd be able to do is similar to how the chat panel is pulled up for me on my side. You at the top of your screen, you would see the option to add the priority matrix meeting agenda. It just opens it up and it pulls up the exact agenda that we have created here together. At that point, it's still 100% collaborative. So you can say, okay, hey team, good morning. I completed this today, completed this yesterday, and I finished this last week. So you can kind of check off those priorities as you discuss them. And if you look down here in the bottom left, it's saying that it basically picked up the fact that I completed those tasks. And this is syncing back to my priority matrix. So you don't have to worry about making changes in multiple places, which is really helpful. Again, during the meeting, as new initiatives are being talked about and new things are being planned, you can actively create that action item still. I had somebody gave me a really cool idea a couple weeks ago, which was the concept of just having like a meeting admin every time who's responsible for prioritizing and tracking the new tasks that were discussed in the meeting. So lastly, what happens is after we close out of the meeting, you can expect it to just take like maybe 5 to 6 minutes, and then you'll see an email pop up in your inbox. What that email is called is it's called your meeting minutes. And for all of the executive assistants on the call today, I know that a lot of the times this burden can be placed on your back, which is, hey, send a follow-up email to everybody talking about or highlighting what we talked about today. But the great news is that no longer has to be set up manually. The system is going to track all of the completed tasks and all of the new items that were created, just to kind of give everybody that high level overview of, hey, here's what happened during the meeting. And again, if there's any priorities that need to be realigned, anything else that needs to be talked about, you can basically that email will link you to these meetings where you can jump back into priority matrix and continue to prioritize and collaborate. So that's a pretty long-winded explanation, but basically what I'm trying to help you understand is the value behind all of this, which is you no longer have to dig through your notes, dig through text messages, meeting notes, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets to say, hey, what have I been working on? As long as you've got that information in priority matrix and you're keeping it up to date, planning for the meeting, collaboration during the meeting, and then that post-meeting follow-up is all going to be handled automatically for you now. Now, in terms of your question, Julian, circling back to how does this work with the people outside of the organization, I was working with a team who would actually be using the system to work with stakeholders during their kind of like monthly or quarterly meetings. And for those stakeholders that join a meeting such as this, where we're using the agenda, although they won't have priority matrix items to prepare for this meeting, they'll still be able to see the meeting agenda that you've created. So they'll kind of, be able to prepare for the meeting based off of your agenda. And then when the meeting ends, they would still receive that follow-up email. The cool thing about that is you guys would be on the same page with being able to see what items were created during the meeting. In other words, what are the next initiatives that the stakeholders basically agreed upon during that meeting? So it's kind of a cool use case, and hopefully that helps, helps you brainstorm how you can use it. Patty said, what if we don't have priority matrix as an app in Teams? Do we lose this feature? So my first question for you would be, are you facing limitations due to IT not allowing you to use priority matrix through Teams? Because I suspect maybe that's why you don't have it in Teams, but okay, so yeah, it sounds like that is the case. And Patty, I would be super happy to connect with you on a personal level to kind of, maybe walk you through some potential ways we can get it added in there for you. But, that's actually a good question, because if you're using priority matrix through the web application, for example, and then you go to a meeting, or I guess this isn't the right one, but then if you go to a meeting through Teams and you add agenda, I suspect that your priorities would still show up for you there, if you were able to add it with your IT restrictions. So I think there's a little bit for us to unpack there, Patty. I'll follow up with you one-on-one, and we can kind of work together to see the best approach for you, if that's okay with you. So that about wraps it up in terms of the meeting management. I hope that was helpful. Again, that's a really highly requested topic, and it's a very powerful way to use priority matrix to kind of take it further than just project and task management. So what are the takeaways for us today? Number one, effective meetings start with a focused meeting agenda, which priority matrix is, luckily going to set that up for you. When you prioritize tasks on demand for your aligned priorities, after the meeting, everybody will hopefully be on the same page and be able to get started together. Get started working on what matters the most, rather. Lastly, follow-up emails define the next steps for everybody involved. So again, after the meeting ends, if there's still any uncertainties about what needs to be worked on or what the next priorities are, hopefully that automatically generated follow-up email will, kind of clarify the next steps for the people that were on that meeting. So how are you going to achieve, ultimately the level of success that you're looking for with Priority Matrix? Number one, of course, is to install Priority Matrix for Microsoft Teams and Outlook. If any of you are in the same boat as Patty and you're facing IT restrictions in terms of getting Priority Matrix installed, let me know. I'll reach out to you one-on-one and I'll send you some ammo that we have to actually work to your advantage to getting Priority Matrix approved. You're also going to want to register for the introduction webinar and the advanced intro webinar, which I briefly mentioned at the start of the session, which I'll send you the links to those right after this meeting ends. Excuse me. And then lastly, like we did today during the webinar and at the very end, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. So even if you watch the intro webinar at your own time, but you're like, hey, I have a couple questions that Erica can answer for me, join that webinar, sit through it, maybe just put it on mute or something. And then at the end, you can pop back up and I can answer those questions for you. So at this time, I would love to kind of pause. I have a couple minutes here booked out for the session. So, please drop questions into the chat or use the little reaction at the top of the screen to raise your hand and I can take you off mute to ask those questions. I really do hope that this was helpful, though. Again, it's a very highly requested topic of support and topic for webinars. And so I hope that I was kind of able to, get your brain juices flowing and help you understand, how this priority matrix meeting support can kind of come into play in your day-to-day professional world. So I'm not seeing any questions come up here, and it looks like Julian, I see your hand. Let me go ahead and take you off mute real quick here. Okay, so I just allowed your mic, so now you can come off mute on your side.
Yeah, so if I have an email that I want to send to a specific task in a project, can I know I've got the priority matrix, create action item in Outlook already set up.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how I can get it to a project, but how do I get it to a specific task in a project, or does it create a task? I want it as more of a note than anything.
Right. Yeah. So tomorrow I'm actually hosting another webinar specifically about email management where we'll take a super deep dive into this. But
Okay.
basically what you'll do, so exactly like you said, you can either create a new task from an email in Priority Matrix, which is, the first approach, or alternatively, if you go to Open Priority Matrix, you can browse your similar resources, click on it, and then click Attach Message, and then you'll be basically attaching that email to a pre-existing task.
And how did you open that? Sorry, you went from the other screen to that screen. Oh, I see it. Okay.
Yeah, so it's the Open Priority Matrix, and then you'll find the pre-existing task which you're looking for. Click on it to open it up, and then hit Attach Message.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and thank you for that question. And again, that is kind of a good segue. Tomorrow, let me double check what time. Looks like tomorrow at 11:30, I'll be hosting a webinar about email management where we'll take a deeper dive into the Outlook 365 integration. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time. I really do hope that this was helpful. I would really look forward to hearing your feedback via email after I send that follow-up. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, as always, I'm really open to hearing those and helping you as best as I can. So just respond back to my email, and I will hopefully be seeing you all joining my upcoming webinars this week. So thanks again. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll talk soon.